In this devotional, I want to answer the question, what's the deal with genealogies? As you read the Bible, you're going to find that there are lots of genealogies in the Bible. There are lots of lists telling you who a person was and the name of their son and their grandson and their great-grandson. And this isn't just like in one little part of the Bible. There are a lot of Old Testament books and some in the New Testament that have lists of genealogies that take up a chapter or sections of a book. And I want to make a case for you about why genealogies are important, because I think a lot of the times when we read a genealogy or when we encounter it, we just sort of skip past it and go on to the next thing. But actually, genealogies can be helpful in your devotional reading of the Bible. And so I want to consider one genealogy, Matthew 1 through 17. These are the first verses of the New Testament, and I think it's fascinating that the New Testament begins with a genealogy, and it's the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And beginning with Abraham, the patriarch of the Hebrew people, and going through David, and eventually ending in Joseph and then Jesus, is this genealogy. And I think it's a really important genealogy, and that's why Matthew has put it at the beginning of his book. And there's several things that we learn by reflecting on this genealogy. The first is this, that genealogies offer nuggets for the careful reader. As I study the Bible, one thing I'm always looking for are nuggets, little truths or little insights that are going to help me understand the Bible and help me grow in my relationship with God. And this genealogy offers some very interesting nuggets. For example, if you go back and you read this slowly, you're going to realize that this isn't just a list of fathers and sons, but at certain points, Matthew includes the name of a mom. For example, he refers to Tamar, he refers to Rahab, then Ruth, he refers to the wife of Uriah, and of course Mary in verse 16. And why I think Matthew does that is he wants us to stop at those moments and to ponder who those women were, because each of those women have a story that you can find in the Bible. And their story is really interesting, and their story is really important to bring us to the point of the birth of Jesus Christ. And so that's a little insight, a little nugget in this genealogy that Matthew's saying, hey, go back and look in the Old Testament, look at these stories, and see how these women played an important role in bringing us to the time of Christ. Another thing that genealogies do, they remind us that these were real people. I once heard a story from an African pastor who, as he was sharing the Bible with some people in his village, it wasn't until they got to the genealogies that the people really began to embrace and believe that the Bible was true, because in their culture they believed very deeply in genealogies and they knew their ancestors. And so they thought that the Bible was just sort of a collection of random stories until they got to the genealogies and they said, wait, these are real people. And so genealogies remind us these are real people, people with families, people who lived on the earth, who struggled with pursuing God just like us. The other thing that genealogies do, they show us that God has always been working in people's lives. As you look at that list in Matthew 1, and as you look at lists throughout the Bible, you realize that God has been keeping track of people since the beginning, that God has been working at people's lives. And even as you look at the genealogy of Matthew 1, a lot of those people, we don't really know who they are, we don't know what they did, but some of them we know and can find their stories in the Old Testament. And so a genealogy is a way for us to say, man, God has been at work in people's lives for generations, and it reminds us that He's at work in our lives, in our day. And so I would just encourage you to end this by discussing, how does understanding genealogies change the way you think about the Bible? At least how you think about genealogies. Think about that for a moment, and next time you encounter a genealogy, don't skip over it. Look at those names and think about what God is trying to teach us in those sections.